Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. I live today into the 20th of Muharram 1442, which is the 8th of September that this recording takes place or took place. Now, we are going to this particular slide is a mark that I am beginning to discuss and display before you the provisions for water pollution control in the Environmental Quality Act 1974. We will take a look, inshallah, of the relevant provisions such as Industrial Effluent Regulations and Sewage Regulations, and these are the two main enforceable the two main regulations which is popularly enforced in Malaysia. And I don't intend to discuss marine waters because those provisions under section 27 and 28, which is also controlling water pollution in this country, it has been were delegated to various relevant agencies. Now, alhamdulillah, let us continue. And for my Muslim brothers and sisters, please refrain from watching this video while you are in the mosque, especially when the khatib is reciting the khutbah for Friday prayers. Please, I thank you very much for your cooperation, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with Jannah, inshallah. Ameen. And go into this part of the law, whereby in this particular provisions, we shall be looking into what you call provisions. What is being displayed before you are actually the control of wastewater, or the term used by the law now is affluent. It could be industrial origin effluent or effluent from human discharges, and collectively or popularly known as sewage. Now, if you look at this particular slide, what we have here is a term which is what I used to preach, what I used to explain in earlier days of the year 1996-97, when I trained, conduct those training. I used to explain what is inland water using a whiteboard, but I don't have access to that right now. So what I could do is to explain you literally the meaning of inland water. Now, in any country, especially here in Malaysia, we are surrounded with water. Now, inland water means it begins from the point that water, groundwater actually, is being emitted, is being released into the land surface via rock fractures and comes out as spring. So the spring, or in bahasa Melayu dipanggil mata air, okay? The spring goes out and perhaps get accumulated in a huge pond on top of a hill, and then gets flowing down as waterfall. That is inland water. So waterfall is inland water. And some of it gets to flow into rivers, and river is considered inland water, right up to the beaches at the lowest astronomical tide. Yeah, that lowest tide from the beach right up to the mountaintop, any water body in between that, including lakes, including wells, including groundwater, these are all termed as inland water. All right. Now, I hope that is clear. Look at this. What do you see? Environmental hazardous substance. We are not allowed unless licensed. We are not allowed to discharge, to release, to let flow, or to purposely flush out water containing environmental hazardous substances into any part of the inland water exceeding what is accepted by the law. Meaning, these are all the discharge standard stipulated under Section 21. That is the meaning of Section 25. We are not allowed to pollute any part of the inland water by releasing environmental hazardous substances normally measured in certain water environmental parameters like pH, COD, BOD. You know COD, right? Chemical oxygen demand, BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, SS, suspended solids, oil and grease, etc., all the heavy metals, and any other environmental hazardous substance into the water body exceeding the limit which is allowable under the law. That's the meaning of the entire thing. Now let's take a look. I want to show you this. There are two regulations here. Number one is Industrial Effluent Regulation. Do you see that? This is the year 2009. This is the latest. Now, Regulation 11 of this particular Industrial Effluent Regulation stipulate the discharge standards. It is termed as acceptable conditions in the law. But for us, environmental engineers, we call it discharge standard or effluent standard. And the standard is found in the fifth schedule of this particular law. Which law? Environmental Quality Industrial Effluent Regulation 2009. And there are two standards, two sets of standards here. One is standard A and another is standard B. Now, in simplistic term, standard A are for discharges, could be factories, could be any activities that discharge wastewater or effluent, whereby from the final discharge point of that releases as it enter a river, that part where there are discharge water enters the upstream of a river, whereby downstream of the river are mainly flowing into a potable water intake point for human drinking, or downstream from that discharge point are human activity that uses water for their livelihood, like horticulture, aquaculture, or that water is being used for human consumption, like human bath there, or human uses that river water for their drinking water and for their food. Those discharge point, which is located upstream from that interest of human, including especially potable water intake point, their discharge standard is being regulated to a higher, very strict limit, and that set of limit is called standard A. Whereas downstream, if our discharges of effluent is released downstream from any human interest for the use of water, is not used as drinking water, and it's not used especially for human consumption, then they are in standard B. Okay, that is other. All right, the standard A is for water catchment areas. That is clear, isn't it? If you are already a competent person in IETS, you know this very well. Now, however, in this particular regulation, there is another exclusive difference, whereby for the COD parameter, there is an exclusive sort of standard whereby all the discharges of effluent wastewater, which is of course subjected to this particular law. We'll discuss that when I get into detail. Not all activities are subjected to this particular regulation. I will discuss that. Are limited to 200 milligram per liter, except for paper mills, textile, and distillates. They've got other standards. Okay, not up to 200 milligram per liter, maybe much strict than that. Now, that is the overview of introduction, literally, for the Industrial Effluent Regulations, whereby this is the most popular regulations being enforced in the country, because the country has got so many numerous number of factories discharging effluent. So they got to be controlled, and most of the rivers in this country, many parts of the rivers are being used for human consumption due to the increase in areas of human dwellers. A lot more, the population is getting bigger, and the distribution of population is now spread, so more water intake for potable water treatment is needed, and therefore they have got to impose certain strict measures. Nonetheless, while we are talking, we just face one issue of water cut in Selangor due to a factory releasing water which is smelly into the rivers, and the potable water facility has got to shut down and clean up. It took them 2 days, I think, and from the investigation, it was found out that a factory has discharged it, and they were being sent to court, and they're being heavily compounded. It's ironic, while this regulation, industrial effluent sewage regulation, has been up in this country since 1979. And yet and they have been given approvals and sets of terms and conditions, and it still happened. But anyway, I wouldn't want to talk about it elaborately. You can find out those issues from the media. Now, there is another law here that controls wastewater, which is called Sewage Regulations 2009. This is treating sewage. As you know, it originates from our toilet, from our doing our businesses, right? And also they are classified into standard A and B as well. So if our discharges from the toilet after going through septic tank, in-house tank, or perhaps a sewage treatment plant, it is also subscribing to A and B if it is discharging, and into certain catchment area. The limits are more stringent as compared to other parts of the inland water. That is with regards to sewage regulation. Now let's go into another slide. Now, I just want to give a brief overview of the liability when we commit an offense under this particular law, especially when they talk about affluent regulation. See, Industrial Effluent Regulation. This law is, look, the charges can be written by virtue of using the regulation itself. We don't have, the authority doesn't need to refer it to the main act. This regulation alone, can be used to charge offenders in court. And also for sewage, it is Regulation 26. This is the offense committed. If we are being charged for the offense, we can be charged under Regulation 32 of Industrial Effluent Regulations if our offenses is pertaining to industrial effluent releases which doesn't conform to the standard, or Regulation 26 is if our sewage releases quality doesn't conform to the Sewage Regulation 2009. Maximum liability in court is 100,000 ringgit and or 5 years imprisonment. Anyone has gone to prison? My answer is yes. How long? Don't ask me. That I cannot release. You got to talk to the DOE and ask, or you can talk to the court and look for past cases and take a look for yourself, and it's all private and confidential. Now let's move on into other parts of the law, which is regulating marine water. As I said earlier, I won't be discussing the details, and I won't be sharing the interpretation of this particular law because it is concerning other agencies now. This particular section, which is section 27, and also another section, section 27 is about prohibition of the release of oil waste, oil into Malaysian waters, and section 29 is about the prohibition of release of waste into Malaysian water. This has been what you call delegated to other agencies. Nonetheless, there is a provision, as I'm sharing you today, that the Environmental Quality Act do look into the discharge of oil waste, and some other waste into Malaysian waters. This is talking about marine water because Malaysia is a peninsula, and the Straits of Malacca, which is known in the world to be one of the most busiest waterways, marine routes in the world. Apart from the Suez Canal and the Panama and a few other straits. Straits of Malacca is busy connecting the east and west. It's a trade route from ancient times, okay? And the Chinese from mainland China has been doing businesses using waterways, marine ways, the Arabic. Even before those earlier times were also using waterways to travel. And as you know, the history goes on. All right, now, discharging oil or oil waste or even waste into Malaysian water is an offense. And if you look at this, oil and mixture containing oil, what is it? You know, in the high seas, all these vessels or tankers carrying oil, they have got to stabilize their ship by taking in seawater in the form of ballast water. There is a tank to stabilize the ship so that high waves would be less detrimental to the ship's navigation safety, you know. And it might, you know, you could ask sailors about this. I'm not a sailor, but that's the reason why they have got ballast water. Somehow when they get into shallow water, the water is calm, The water is steady, not much of a wave, and the ship is more stabilized. So what they do is to have a good speed, perhaps to increase hydrodynamic. I think that's the word. Yeah. On land it's called aerodynamic, but for water, I think to flow through water, to cut through water is hydrodynamic. I hope it's correct. I'm not the expert. So those water tank, which is called ballast water, is being released. Unfortunately, in some cases, these ballast water, when they are in shallow waters, they would put in goods, and use that compartment, and it could be stained with it could be contaminated with oil and other materials. So as they discharge it in the Straits of Malacca, perhaps other straits as well, these ballast water are contaminated, are polluted. So that is the meaning for section 27 here. They are not allowed to discharge oil or oil mixture containing oil due to that process of ballast and deballasting. Also, there you are. Environmental hazardous substance, pollutants, and waste are also not allowed to be discharged. There are incidences when, I think, if you are a shipping agent, or you were a ship captain, or you were a crew in the ship, you know what happened better than I do. Okay, so I think this makes sense. I think this is understandable. We are not allowed to discharge or release any pollutants and waste into the marine waters of Malaysia, meaning Malaysian water. Does this law apply for EEZ? I think not. It is only applied in Malaysian waters, which is what they call Malaysian terrestrial water, which is about 12 nautical miles from the shore. From the lowest astronomical tide of Malaysian shore up to 12 nautical miles is territory of Malaysian law. But beyond 200 nautical mile, then the Exclusive Economic Zone Act would comes in. That it's about up to 200 nautical miles to approve resource exploitation, and all this, and that is another law. Exclusive Economic Zone Act. People in the oil and gas knows this very well. I don't intend to cover that here. Now, of course, the offense for releasing water, releasing oil and mixture of oil in marine waters is a big offense, and due to the nature of impact, the magnitude of impact and the severity of impact is huge. Therefore, the penalty is huge. It's up to $500,000 ringgit if found guilty, and also 5 years. Has anyone been charged with this? Yes. Have they paid the penalty? My answer is yes. How much? I've heard of maximum of 500,000 ringgit in Malaysia, and the ship was apprehended. The shipping agent pay the bond, and then the court proceeding takes place, etc., etc., until the end of the case. All right. Okay, so we are not interested to discuss this. I'm showing you what are the contents of the Environmental Quality Act enabled the government to control water pollution, inland water, and also marine water. I'm just sharing you a picture of why marine water regulation is important, because this was an incident in the mid and or late 90s, whereby it was a condition in the haze, and according to the captain, their radar was not clear due to the thickness of the haze. They were not able. They spotted an object, which is another ship actually, in front of them, and they didn't have that time, enough time to do braking. The brake is not, the shipping brake is not like our brakes using Brembo calipers. No, their brake is reverse thrust of the engine, and even that they have, the captain has put in reverse thrust, and it took some distance to stop, fully stopped, put on halt. It took some distance. Unfortunately, it is too late, and they collide each other. This ship uh, bang into another ship, and that has caused, look, this is the ship hull actually, and that has caused, look at this, it's a burst of oil. You see, upon collision, this ship was carrying crude oil, and it burst, and that amount of oil has spilled all over this area, and it has caused a lot of people to come and do rescue and also contain these oil using all sorts of booms, skimmers, hoses. All sorts of rescue has been deployed, but the flow is the flow of water depending on the current, and apparently I think it was some meteorological factor. The oil, the crude oil, the oil slick, we call it, has moved away from the shores of Peninsular Malaysia, I think, and it went into some other parts, and it has crossed the border. And this was a picture taken across the border to one of the shoreline, and you could see tar being deposited. You see, oil will usually float, but due to temperature and pressure, after a while of floating, it becomes denser, and it becomes cooler and denser, and as it gets to shore, it's being washed to the shore and deposited as tar. And if the slick is mild, you could see tar balls at beaches, but this is a huge spillage. It's an oil spill, major oil spill, you know and 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 they've got to do cleanup, and there's a lot of marine life which is affected. Even avians, birds, are also being jeopardized, and this picture is taken after a massive cleanup. There is still a lot of deposits, at this rock structure of the shore, and it's difficult, and I don't think it's clean 100%. So nature takes its course, and of course some of these materials get into the ecological system, ecological cycles, gets into the food chain, etc., etc. You know better than I do. And this is also a picture of the same incident taken in some parts of the shore, which is a mangrove swarm, and the other part is a mangrove swamp. This is a shore, and you could see deposits of oil over here. These are all oil which is still floating, and these are oil which has sunk in as sediments, and this is rather permanent, and it would affect gas exchange, water and the soil with the air, because these are all airable. Water is airable, land is airable, and all the ecosystem, the inhabitants of the ecosystem depends on air and also water, but they are being deprived of dissolved oxygen due to the presence of all this oil slick. And that is a bad impact, and this impact is taking some time. And while during and within that time, there's a lot of changes to the ecological cycles. There will be an impact to some trophic levels of the ecosystem, probably the lower trophic levels, and also the aquatic life. And if we eat the fish, you can imagine what gets into our system. Now, after this, in the next video, I'll be beginning to interpret, not to say really interpret, to share and also disclose some important, meanings of the Industrial Effluent Regulation and also the Sewage Regulation. Will do this, and probably I will call it some other names, and probably water pollution, or affluent, decoding affluent regulations, etc. We'll try and do that. And I think you remember our friend. What's this? Branch alkyl benzene sulfonate. All right, we'll look at it in the following videos. So thank you. This is about it for the introduction of our sharing of the provisions that is available under the under the Environmental Quality Act for water pollution. So thank you for watching. Thank you, especially subscribers and also viewers. I pray that all of you are being blessed with good health, prosperity, and longevity and happiness. All right, as a Muslim, I end this video by wishing everybody Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi